1982, it was May. I think Danny and Tish'a BeAb here will remember. Hillel had 8th grade, and there was no high school at the time. Every kid that went to Hillel Elementary went on to either Ocean Township or Asbury Park High School. And I got a call. I was going to Flatbush at the time, and I got a call saying that, even though I was in Flatbush, that Hillel was having, instead of a graduation trip, some rabbi, Rabbi Labaton and his wife, Emily, decided that a Shabbaton would be appropriate instead of a graduation trip. We ended up in the Jackson Hotel, and that Shabbaton was 8th grade kids, and the message of that weekend at the time was to try and get us to go to Yeshiva High School. Everyone thinks about it today like it's unheard of, but back then, getting kids to go to Yeshiva High School was pretty much, we were working against the odds. Rabbi Labaton and Emily, from that point on, I was hooked, and starting in 9th grade, I think my life changed forever. I was involved with plenty of activities. What was really special and what was inspirational about the rabbi was he heard us as teenagers. He connected with us. We were able to think outside the box, come up with programs, and every time we thought of something, the rabbi was, what do you need? How can we do it? Let's think, how can we do things differently? He never was happy with the status quo. The reason you're all sitting here today is because of that inspiration. It was he who inspired what you see going on in the SCA, what you see going on in this room today, in this building today. It was one person, literally, in Westfield, a little house shul that thought a lot bigger than the community. And back then, when he talked about having a Tish'a BeAb program, and at that time, that was when you went to the movies, and that was when you watched whatever you could watch. We didn't have Netflix, we didn't have Amazon, any of these things to watch, and you would keep yourself busy in bed all day. And the rabbi thought of an idea, let's run some classes, let's see what we can get. And at the time, we went to 1 class, 2 classes, and what you see here today, I wish the rabbi was here to see this. He'd be so proud. I get emotional, I'm sorry, when it comes to the rabbi. He played a big role in my life, and you're very fortunate when you get someone like that to be part of your life. And I'm going to let Emily speak in about another minute. I just wanted to share one thing that Friday nights, just to give you a little taste, in the wintertime, the rabbi used to give an Avi class. And it was Friday night after shul, when usually people are hungry. The rabbi had us mesmerized. I was 15 years old. We would sit for the class for 45 minutes, then walk the rabbi home to have his whole family waiting by the front steps, killing me because they wanted to eat, and it was 2 hours later. So I apologize to the kids and the family, but it just is something special. So there's one thing that Rabbi Labaton taught me was, and I remember when Rav Soloveitchik passed away, he gave a class every single year. Every single class he gave, he wanted you to know who his teacher was and what he stood for. And to me, we got that message, and loud and clear as you can see, everything is here, and no one should ever forget that Rabbi Labaton existed, what he did, and his impact. And without any further, I'd love to have Emily say a few words of tribute. Thank you. Please come into the front seats if you can. Come to the front. There's more seats.
Okay. So for the record, we didn't really drag a bunch of kids away from having a senior trip and force them to have a Shabbaton. No. For the record, the senior trip that year to Washington was canceled because of some disciplinary issues the year before. Just to correct history. So, on Tish'a BeAb, I think a lot about mourning. It's a day of national mourning, of course, but inevitably when I sit on the floor, I feel like I'm sitting Shiva again. Tish'a BeAb makes me cry for Jerusalem, but also evokes my own sadness. I am sure that I'm not alone in this. The day is designed to use symbols which are jarringly both national and intimately personal. I was recently studying the laws of mourning, and I found a series of halachot which I had never seen before, and which actually have become obsolete. They relate to the mitzvah of kriya, ripping our garments, the most raw, cathartic symbol of the rupture that we experience when a loved one dies. Kriya is core to the experience of mourning, of avelut. It has biblical origins. In other words, all have images of biblical figures facing tragedy and tearing their clothes in response. And in fact, it's the only detail in all of the laws of avelut where the rabbis have a principle of being machmir. It is at once very deeply emotional and designed to be spontaneous, and at the same time a moment which is very clearly legislated and regulated by the rabbis. How much we tear, when we tear, standing, where we are when we tear, for whom, how long we wear the torn garment. What took me by surprise, and I thank Rabbi Harold Sutton for helping me understand it better, was that the Gemara and the Rambam give very specific guidelines about what to do with the torn garment after the days of mourning are over. After Shiva, we are permitted to mend the torn garment, but only with irregular stitches, kind of a basting. After 30 days, we are allowed to mend it, but with more meticulous stitches, creating a less visible seam. But when we mourn for our parents, even after 30 days, the sewing cannot be perfected. This element has essentially disappeared from our avelut. In our more affluent world and with clothing that is almost disposable, who would consider mending such a garment? As soon as Shiva ends, most people throw the garment out, and perhaps, I think, almost attached to it a fear of superstition. But the image is so powerful. I can easily imagine the act of restitching. I'm sorry? I can imagine the act of restitching. I can imagine a mourner wanting to hold on to the cloth that evokes the memory of loss. It makes emotional and religiously symbolic sense to me at the end of Shiva to look at the shirt and ask, what should I do with this object that I have worn next to my heart and that has been such an intimate symbol of my grief? And the nuanced rabbinic response about sewing is so sensitive to the aftermath of mourning. The rabbis push us to repair the injury to our clothing and to our hearts, but they recognize that it would be false to erase the scars completely, because the rupture is now a part of who we are. We have rituals that help us take slow, tiny steps back into the world of humankind. Little by little, kim'ah, kim'ah, we see glimpses of redemption, of nechama. But we cycle back again and again to the mourning, to the trauma, and we hold on to the grief, the mended garments. We know that they will never be truly repaired or exactly the same, but we know that we are whole in new ways. It is somehow miraculously possible to be torn and whole at once. It is a profoundly human way to exist. On a national level as well, trauma doesn't go away completely, even in the face of redemption. We say Hallel on Yom HaAtzmaut for the most miraculous moment in modern Jewish history, but we relive the trauma on Tish'a BeAb because the rupture is part of being a Jew, even as we envision redemption. When I spoke a few years ago on Tish'a BeAb, I was closer to mourning. People told me that it was helpful to hear a public conversation about the grief, that they had had trouble talking about with others. I hope my words today will be helpful as well. I am in an easier place now, but I know there are many among us in different stages of mourning, and I hope that it's helpful. So for me, healing and healing. The loss is an organic part of me, but there are always those threads mending the garments of sadness. The sewing comes in form of memories, always sad and poignant and happy at the same time. Every day, all day, I see him in my children, in their gestures, in their quirks, in their ways of thinking, their devotion to his values, each in their own way. When we wonder, what would Daddy think? What would Daddy do? In the summer, when I spend time with his mom and his sisters and his nieces and nephews, when I hear a Yankee game, at the ocean, when I have questions, small and enormous, when I need him to share a burden, when I need him to remind me to stay balanced, when I'm with Sam Sutton, the friend with whom he was totally himself, when I play with my grandchildren, when someone else is going through what he went through, and I recognize their fear and pain, when I get a call from someone who is listening to his voice teaching and shares it with me, when people tell me little stories about his kindnesses, which are his essential legacy. Bobby's right, he would be very proud and excited by what is happening here today. He loved and revered the community. Almost in a way that was over the top. I think when he was within the community and talking about the community, as so many of us, he could be very critical. But most of you have never heard him outside the community talking about the incredibleness of the community to people outside it. He adored the community. At the same time, he insisted that loyalty to the community coexist with the ultimate core values of Judaism: kavod habriot, the search for truth in Torah, connection to the entire Jewish people, and concern for the world. Most important, he felt supreme and absolute confidence in the community, its capacity to survive, to preserve its traditions, to hold on to its extraordinary sensibilities. Because of his supreme confidence in the community, he knew that its traditions would not crumble as women became active participants in shul, as women learned Torah side by side with men, as women contributed their Torah scholarship to the community in public forums. The SCA and Tanakh study has actualized these realities, enriching and deepening Torah values in the community. Because of his confidence in the community and because of his compassion in the face of grief, I think he similarly knew that having a woman eulogize a loved one would not shatter the community, but rather evoke bechi, deeper consolation for the mourners, and more appropriate kavod hamet, honor to the deceased. All halachic foundations of avelut, which he spoke about so often. Because of his confidence in the community, he knew that the unique loyalty that the community inspires would not be diluted when people reached out to other communities, locally, nationally, in Israel, internationally, and I think of his own commitment to Soviet Jewry and to Ethiopians. And to refugees. And today, the community's outreach to Pittsburgh and even to Africa and other distant places where human beings are in need of aid. Because of his confidence, he knew that the community could sustain different, even opposing Torah philosophies. His view of unity was a community where Jews respected each other, not a unity which demanded that everyone conform to artificial norms which would ultimately be alienating to many. While he passionately demanded a search for truth, he also deeply understood that human beings find meaning in different religious truths. He knew that as an educator, as a rabbi who counseled so many, as a husband and as a father, and as a person who is honest about his own journeys through life. To Bobby and to the SCA, thank you, and to all of you who've come here, thank you for giving me space today to talk about him, perhaps to help others in their sadness, to help us observe Tish'a BeAb in a more profound way, to bring the community together. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's get people to move around.